In America, the freedom ain't free. In America, got soldiers dying overseas. So America.
Yeah.
Back at it
Yeah.
like a snack habit. And you know what? You got to be mindful of them snack habit, because this holiday season I have been all off my wagon.
There we go. Get this mic right. That's right.
All kind of chili
You
man.
don't want no grapes and bananas.
I know.
Though I do have a taste for grapefruit and blueberries right now.
My pattern feels so off. You hear me?
That's what I really want.
My pattern feels so off right now. My eating pattern.
I've been doing pretty good.
You've been ridiculous too. Get out of here. You ain't been good.
No, that's not true. That's not true, boo-boo. I'm still eating pretty much in my eating window.
How many times you eating a day?
What you mean?
How many times you eating a day?
Well, my window has closed, technically.
Okay.
I want some fruit.
All right, y'all. So, y'all saw the other video I did. I don't know if this one is first and that was second. I don't know. However, whichever order I put that one up. But this one says Asian slaves and slave trade in the Indian Ocean. So I'm hoping this is accurate, because I was looking at the description, and I guess this was a college student, a person going for their thesis, and it said on one of the sections said, they probably went back and will go back and try to make corrections. But I want to see how close this is, because they don't have a lot of information on Asian slaves on YouTube. I didn't see a lot of information about Asian slaves, and I don't know why, because they were in the slave trade too. But
Having to look for some outside reputable resources outside of YouTube would be a place where you have to go.
That'd be next.
For more accurate information.
More accurate.
All right, let's
see. But I've been doing it from a standpoint of trying to do it from videos. Of course, I can go get like a
Well, then that's how you truly fact checking it against the video content. You're gonna pull up some evidence, empirical based evidence.
But I be wanting to see the video side of it too. But I understand.
It was good.
This is the island nation of Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka.
This is Colombo, the capital of that country. And in the heart of this city lies a small suburb officially known as the Company Street by the Brits, or as Compagnieweg here by the Dutch and the current government. Today it is a bustling commercial area with upscale hotels and shopping malls, but to its city dwellers it is known as Slave Island. Only most of them don't exactly know where and how that name came to be. And yes, today it is no longer an island. We all are very aware of the transatlantic slave trade and its consequences. Throughout the years, there has been much historical research, social movements, great movies, and many depictions that cover the forced migrations of between 12 and 15 million people from Africa to the Western Hemisphere. And yes, I know what you're wondering. If you read the title, it was not fully clickbait, kinda. But you see, we hardly hear about the slave trade that occurred in the Indian Ocean basin in the same period of time. And we hardly hear about the trading of so-called colored slaves. And frankly, that's because this area of research is at its early stages, and there is ongoing movement by many historians.
What do you mean colored slaves?
To these silent segments of slaves.
South Africa?
So, this small video is about a small sliver of that story now being uncovered. Prior to the abolition of slavery in 1843 in the United Kingdom, Colombo had a great population of slaves. Yes, although Britain passed the Slavery Abolition Act in 1833 around Sri Lanka, or Ceylon as it was called back then, they had some clear problems doing that until a decade later. You see, the Portuguese who ruled from 1517 before the Dutch had great trouble cultivating and transforming the land around these fortifications in the city due to constant wars with the natives. And let's say Portuguese did what was prudent and sourced the bonded slaves which they brought or bought from the colony of Mozambique. When the Dutch East India Company ousted them in 1656, the Dutchmen stuck to the Portuguese solution and imported slaves to Colombo, which worked well within their policy of not enslaving indigenous subjects of the company territories. Now, the slave island, for a lack of a better term, has an interesting story behind it. Let's turn to this colonial writer Alan Walters, who in his book Palms and Pearls, or Scenes in Ceylon, describes how this island got its name. One night, in the old slave times before the year of 1844, the Kaffir slaves in a certain house in the fort, in consequences of cruel treatment, rose and murdered a whole family. Thenceforth, the slaves were every evening put into punts at sunset and roved to what was then an island, where they were kept under safeguard until the morning. The Dutchmen, after this incident, fearing for their lives that a Kafir slave might knife them to death in the dead of night, confined their slaves to an area called Kafirse and infested the surrounding lake with crocodiles and installed a huge gibbet to remind the slaves of what will become of them if they attempted to escape.
Dang!
Now that sucks.
Most of the stories about
No
slavery in
chance.
Colombo are most likely lost. This is not very surprising. Foremost, there has never been any civil movement such as we come to see in the Americas for the emancipation of slaves. And of course, the only records that exist today are criminal records of different slaves, which are always written from the perspective of their masters, accusing and dehumanizing the subjects. And almost all would remain nameless in these annals. However, we do know that the bonded slaves in Colombo had a much different life to that compared to, say, those in the Cape or the Caribbean. A segment of slaves was even provided a promise of freedom after 1 year of faithful service. This was unusual for the time, to say the least. And the Dutch would come to regret it later when they will face severe slave shortages. As much as 10,000 slaves were put to work by 1661, and slaves constituted more than half of the population in Colombo, clearly depicting the dependency of Colombo on slave labor.
Wow.
This high proportion could be compared to the situation in 18th century Cape or South Carolina. Colombo would also serve as a hub for the officers in Batavia, today Jakarta, to host their slave trade under the noses of the VOC. There are accounts of these officers forcefully hijacking and enslaving whole passenger vessels as slaves. Now, unlike the Portuguese, who sought to supply from the East African coast, the Dutch in Ceylon mostly did not import slaves from the African circuit. Although the details are notoriously blurry and controversial, we now have evidence showing that these slaves were sourced from the areas of India such as Malabar, Coromandel, and Bengal coast, and from Southeast Asian origins encompassing Malaysia, Indonesia, New Guinea, and southern Philippines.
Okay.
While Southeast Asian slave making is similar to that of the so-called African circuit, which is usually by force, the bouts of the South Asian slave making is quite different, as they were usually the products of hard times. Individuals either sold themselves or family members into slavery in times of famine.
Biblical, right there.
Around 1660 saw a boom in the trading of slaves in the region, with tens of thousands of slaves being shipped to and from Colombo, mostly coming from South India. By the turn of the decade, this easy supply of voluntary bondage had dried up, and the VOC would soar to traditional supplies of enslavement such as slave raiding and debt bondage in Indonesia. Eastern Indonesia replaced South Asia as the main source of slaves for Batavia, which also made more sense logistically as Colombo was much further to the new Batavian hub. Also, the much more lucrative trades in the transatlantic route placed increasingly less significance on Colombo, which no longer showed much promise to the VOC investors.
So they were like, man, we good over here, man. We gonna get the ones coming through the transatlantic because that one's booming. This one over here in Colombo is kind of like, who coming our way to come get these? That's the only thing I'm thinking of because it didn't seem like they were like, we got to go all out the way to get these over here. And do I want it was like, do I want a Malaysian slave or, a Filipino slave? I wonder if that the question, because I'm sure the cost for one of those were a lot more heftier than a Negro slave, than a black slave.
Finally, the British takeover of Ceylon marked the slow demise of the slave trade in Colombo. And after the passage of time, the slave metamorphosized into coolies and then to the status of migrant laborers and onto indentured laborers. Now, if you ever visit this beach-going nation, and I think you should, now you will know why this piece of their capital is discreetly called as Slave Island. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a like. And if you want to know about some other kooky bit of knowledge, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell button.
Yeah, this wasn't what I thought.
It wasn't what I thought either.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a little bit more.
We're still gonna post it, but I thought. But he said it. He said it though. But he said it though, Joy. He said, well, I just got you. It's not really what the title says. I'm like,
click.
What?
Yeah, he only hint like a, not even that. It was like a.
And then it was so small that he just showed you pictures of the countries, of the Asian countries,
and talked about how they either sold themselves into slavery. Or like a trade pretty much for the family.
Right.
But it was different a whole different type of mindset. It was completely different.
Y'all,
guess.
you, those people enslaved themselves because they didn't have the money or they were hungry. But
yeah, I definitely want to check the facts and do a little bit more or see what else we can find or even pull up an article and talk and read some things in it because this didn't say much at all.
It didn't, but the title was ultra clickbaity because you're like, oh, Asian slaves. You know,
he was talking about stuff in the beginning that we already know.
Yeah, and then I was like, where's what I'm looking for? This ain't it.
So, guys, if you have any sites or any information about, the Asian slave trade and how slavery was in that part of the world, because we do know that we have recently learned that this has been a worldwide commodity, that this was a form of business across the world.
The world created.
And it was different in different places of how they treated, their slaves. But pretty much the darker the slave, the more harsh the treatment.
The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. She blacker than the malt too. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
You don't remember what movie that came from.
So, man, I thought we was going to get some more
I'm thinking like a full off
insight, and I was going to learn
Chinese dude
something new about
being captured,
slavery in that part of the world.
Yeah. That was a little dull. I wanted something meatier like all these other slave trades are a little bit thicker.
Yeah, so we have to keep searching.
I'll keep searching. I'm gonna find it. Because if everybody was slave, then there's some information out there. But maybe, like I said, maybe it wasn't as important coming from the Asian side like it was transatlantic. People didn't care as much, or it wasn't as beneficial having an Asian slave at all like it was where you can, probably the cost of probably one Asian slave probably cost you about 3 or 4 or 5 black slaves. So I'm sure it was a money thing.
Yeah.
Plus the travel. That's a long way from where they were doing business. That was a long trade. Who going out the way for that?
Well, you have to really, really see the value. Truly have to see the value.
You need You need some of them people that was putting down the railroad.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
No.
I mean, you mean for workers?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. But those people weren't slaves at that time.
They weren't slaves. I think it was just they probably came out west for came out west for work. You know what I'm saying?
And that's where they were, because they were under some harsh conditions.
You had to say that again. Just trying to see how you say
it. I'm making sure I say it clearly. Yeah.
All right, now like, comment, subscribe. Don't take a nosedive, but comment down in the section below if you want some. What's that, babe? If they want some what?
They want some more. Want some more.
Some more.
Want some more.